In this video, I will show you how to create a simple course, and we will set it up as a drip style course, which will deliver course lessons or messages on a schedule with some automations. So let's get into it. I'm going to name this course Drip Course. You can name it whatever you want. So now we are in the course builder, and so we want to start to add some content to our course. So I can select a template from my library, or I can just create a new one. I'll create a new one. I'll call this lesson 1. And, we can add like video or audio or files or a form or all sorts of stuff into this. I'm just going to keep it simple for this video, and I'm just going to say this is lesson 1. I'm going to add lesson 2 now. So we can, again, select from our library, or we can compose it as a new piece of content here. This is lesson 2. Again, each message can have all sorts of stuff: appointment booking, product offers, forms, files, videos, audio, whatever it is. I'm just going to keep it simple here. This is just text. I'll add just one more. This is going to be lesson 3. And if you want to add like additional content underneath each one, sort of like modules in a course with multiple pieces of content, you can turn these into threads. For now, we're just going to stick with simple messages. Okay, so this very simple course has 3 lessons, lessons 1, 2, and 3. Now, if I don't do anything else, when we enroll people in this course, then all 3 of these lessons, everything that we see here is going to be immediately populated into each student's enrollment. So they're going to see all 3 of these messages immediately on day 1. But what we actually want is for these to be dripped out on a schedule where the first one is delivered right away, but the second lesson we want to deliver, let's say 3 days later, and then the third lesson 3 days after that. So we could set this up on an individual basis, or we can just set up the drip settings all in one shot here by clicking drip settings. So the first thing is we will want to enable the drip setting. So this is how we can apply automations to all of the messages in this course all at once. So we have the drip setting turned on, and now we want to say, let's have them drip 3 days, or you can select, hours or months or whatever. We're going to do 3 days in between each message. And then you can select what is actually the triggering event for the next message to start its 3-day timer. So by default, it's published, or we can say viewed. So published would mean like every time we post. So when the first message gets posted, from that point forward, we immediately start the 3-day timer, and then 3 days later, the next message is going to post. If we select viewed, then the first message or the first lesson gets posted, and then we wait for your client or the student in the course to actually view that message, and from that point forward we start the 3-day timer. So that's the difference between published and viewed. I'll just go with published for now. So this is an automation that is going to apply to all 3 lessons in my course. So I'm going to click that. Okay, so you're going to see this message here temporarily while those automations get applied, which should just take a second. And all you need to do is refresh the page, and that should be gone. And so now you'll see these messages sort of above the additional lessons in the course. So the first lesson has the first lesson will be delivered immediately. So we don't see that extra message above. And then these additional messages are sort of faded out unless you hover over them. And we see here that this message will post automatically 3 days after lesson 1 is published. And then this one, lesson 3, will post automatically 3 days after lesson 2 is published. So now that we've applied those individual automations to these messages, we can go into them individually by clicking either this icon here, or you can click the edit link, and that's going to give you more fine-grained control over the the specific automation for that particular lesson. So for example, if we wanted to have, the first one immediately, second lesson 3 days later, and then the third lesson 6 days later, we can make that sort of edit by clicking edit. Also, technically, sort of under the hood, the way that this is working is, again, lesson 1 posts immediately. Lesson 2 comes 3 days later. That happens based on the workflow that is actually attached to lesson 1. So lesson 1 has the workflow that says when this lesson or this message, same thing, when that's published, then 3 days later, lesson 2 will be posted. And you can go in here and you can change all sorts of settings with the workflow, but it's set up for you by default. So when you click edit on this message, which is sort of right above lesson 2, telling us that lesson 2 will publish 3 days after lesson 1, when I click edit on that, it's actually doing the same thing as if I edit the workflow attached to lesson 1. And then same thing down here. So lesson 3 posts 3 days after lesson 2. So if I click edit on this, it's actually editing lesson 2's workflow, because lesson 2's workflow is the one that triggers when lesson 2 is published, and then 3 days later, it's going to post lesson 3. So that's how we sort of handle this chain reaction, right? Lesson 1 triggers lesson 2, lesson 2 triggers lesson 3. And again, we can have more fine-grained control over, whether it's triggered when from the actual published time or when the message is viewed, or you can even wait for the person to post a response, or if the lesson has a task on it, you can wait until the task has been marked complete. We're also adding an option to trigger messages when a task becomes overdue. So there's all sorts of, deeper, more complex automations that you can add. But just sort of backing out, up here at the top, the drip settings, this is where you can apply a drip schedule to all of the messages in your course all at once. Makes it nice and easy. Now, one more thing, since we've already added automations to the messages in this course, if I were, you can still use this panel here to reapply or to change all of the automations across all of the messages in this course. So if, for example, if I changed it from 3 days to 3 weeks in between, we can do that, but it's actually going to warn me first, because we have already created some automations. So first it's just going to ask, do we want to apply these automations to only the messages that might not yet have any automations, or just overwrite and change all the automations all in one shot? It'll lose whatever fine-grained control we've already configured. So that's why we sort of warn you here. But you can do that if you want to sort of like start fresh and then again go back in and add some more fine-grained control if you want. So that's a look at a drip style course. And just to show you this full through, so if I enroll the first person in it, test@test.com, and let's say we just send them that invitation. Okay, so now we have actually enrolled the first person. They go by the name of test. We can look at that. And now I'm actually looking at the course enrollment for this client or this student who is named test. And as you can see, we only see lesson 1. But if you click on it, you can see that this lesson has a workflow which will trigger 3 days after like right now. Since this posted right now, the next one will trigger 3 days from now. And then after that, the third lesson will trigger 3 days after that. So that is drip style courses in Clarityflow.